Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of a podcast that we're doing together called Some of Us. I'm episode of a podcast that we're doing together called Some of Us. I'm Emma. I'm one of your hosts. I'm normally going to be helping to interview people. Our guest tonight or today or whenever you're listening to this is Andrew. So can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Andrew Esdon.
And so this episode is really just like us learning about Andrew, learning about his past, his beliefs, how he came to believe the things that he does. And we're really just going to see what he's all about. So without further ado, Andrew, would you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm 21 years old. I guess because this is a political show, people are always going to be guessing about what our viewpoints are. So I'll state I'm a 21-year-old white male, college student, probably considered raised upper middle class. So we got that out of the way.
Okay.
I think we can get the technical stuff out of the way. I'm studying recreation and leisure, so that's basically being a professional extrovert. I really have always been a people person, and even if I didn't do the best in school, I've always loved to apply myself and learn about how to connect with people, no matter what situation.
Do you know how that developed, like, as you grew up?
I think I was always good with words. I like to read a lot, and I like to write, even though my handwriting is garbage. I just like to put words together. And I found the more articulate I could make myself, the more I could talk to people and use words to make them understand me. And it started as a defense mechanism to, like, emotionally attack people who hurt me. But it eventually became just a tool I used to bring information out of them and be able to present my own information better.
And do you think that had, like, anything to do with maybe your upbringing or something that you encountered as you were younger? Also, if you don't feel comfortable answering any of these questions, you absolutely don't have to, and you can let me know at any time. So.
Perfect. I definitely think it has some part to do with my upbringing. My parents are very articulate and well put together, and they definitely strive to hear everybody's story if they're willing to put it out there. I definitely think that in today's modern climate, like, they don't have a side. They just pick whatever's best in the moment, and that really made me, like, in the moment kind of adaptable in my life. And I never felt like I couldn't talk to them, and so that always gave me, like, the outlet of the talking was the route to take.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to learn how to communicate. Kind of shifting a little bit, do you think that, like, you learned a lot of what you believe from them? So, like, a lot of your politics? Because, I mean, like, I know you, and I know that you're far more right-leaning than most people our age. So, do you think that, like, that comes from family or that comes from school? Like, where does that come from in your life?
Definitely not directly from them, because my family is traditionally liberal. I'd say they fall a bit more on the NDP spectrum. So for those not from Canada, NDP is kind of more of a leftist centrist party. They kind of just take views as they come and pick which party they think is best. They did, however, teach me, like, how to interpret information and apply logic. And to me, I just kind of believe that all the information I'm seeing, I'm getting different answers than what my family and most other people are getting, and that's led me to the beliefs I believe. I don't hold a lot of the same beliefs that many people on the right do. Like, I'm not for religious schooling. I'm not against gay rights. I'm not for anti-environment things. I just am for guns. I'm for tax breaks for big businesses. I'm for encouraging monetary progress in the current situation that the world's in. And well, and then where it gets tricky is I don't like refugees, but I do like immigrants. So, the left is a little bit too far for me, and the right just has a little bit of what I want, so that's where I've ended up.
Okay, so you're more of like a rightist centrist. Do you agree with that?
I'm a writer. That's where I've I would say some people call me like libertarian too. So like I would say I just believe that anyone can handle their own life and the government doesn't need to be involved, and a lot of the things that have been wrong with the world I believe have been solved, at least in Western society. So I don't think the government needs to be interfering as much as they do.
Yeah. Because you mentioned something earlier that was interesting. Can you explain what being for guns is to you?
I just called it for guns because that's the easiest way to put that sentence out there. But the reality is I'm for, people call them self-defense rights or being able to provide themselves. I call them like individual capability rights. I believe if I need to defend myself, or if I need to hunt for my own food, or if I need to feel safe, even if it doesn't ever actually have to be needed as a weapon for self-defense, that is a right that I should be allowed to have. And I completely understand where Canada's stance is, and I believe that you should have to pass safety courses and get a possessions license and all that. I do think the States is a bit too lenient. I also understand where people don't like fully automatic weapons, but where most of society stands right now is they have a problem with fully semi-automatic weapons, which are not a thing. Semi-automatic just means anything that you pull the trigger and one bullet comes out. That includes shotguns, which can send 12 gauges flying into people, butchering them, or slugs, which are basically just wall destroyers if you think about it. But nobody's out there protesting shotguns. They're protesting AR-15s, which are some of the safest guns that have ever been made in history. So I just believe people, if you want to buy a machine that has a very single linear purpose and it makes your life easier or safer, do it. And the government shouldn't really get a say in that unless it is a safety violation to the public.
Do you really believe that guns can be safe? And could you tell me a little bit about why?
Modern guns, at least for the last 5 to 10 years, are nothing but safe. The thing, it's fucking rhetoric, but people who use guns for wrong reasons are what's dangerous, because they have a mindset that most sane people, or I shouldn't say sane, most people who hold common values can't understand, because we aren't those people. So when somebody is holding a gun and going to use it for a crime or with ill intent, none of us have ever been in that situation, so we don't understand what the motive is or how it applies. But what we do understand is how a gun works. So when we see that, we understand that it does this, and we can attack that because we understand it. When you don't understand something, we don't really have any way of applying to control it. Guns are purposely built to not fire unless there's no trigger lock, no safety muzzle, no the safety's not on, there's it's not chambered, whatever reason. You hear some of these things are taken, beating against walls, thrown on the ground, and pushed to their absolute limits to see if they're going to fire if somebody drops them, and they don't. Where I have the problem is there needs to be safety regulations, and that's where the government should be, they have to regulate the manufacturers. I don't think they need to regulate the people so much. They need to regulate manufacturers, and the manufacturers should have requirements for who can buy them. That's the difference. There's a private industry who can provide regulations like you need a license to buy. Automotive does the same thing. Government has influenced that. They created that environment where that happened. But we've ended up with a mentality that guns are the problem, when even just recently, I think it was a month ago in Paris, a dude walked into a police station and stabbed 4 police officers. Now, those are people who we actually want to have guns and are very, very well trained with them, and they couldn't do shit about that because that's not how human reaction time works. So if you want to look at me and say that guns are the problem, I'm going to look at you and say No, I think humans that we don't understand are the problem. And this is where I get my mentality of wanting to understand people.
But do you really think that access to guns is going to solve a problem?
Like, having access to guns is going to solve a problem?
Yeah.
No, it's not going to solve the problem. What it's going to do is it allow me to not die before the problem's solved, because I know that I'm fine and that the people I keep around me are people I'd like to keep alive, and I'm going to do everything in my power to do that. And I know Canada doesn't have very good self-defense laws when it comes to if you're getting attacked, but I would rather go to jail than die, because death is an absolute, and I don't like absolutes. Absolutes are dumb. So if somebody fucking jumps me and is trying to stab me, I'm going to do everything in my power to kill them.
So you seem to be, I don't want to say the word worried because I don't think that's right. I want to say you seem to be more vigilant than the average 21-year-old about the people that we can't understand and control. Do you know why that is?
I just hear, I hear the same stories everyone else is hearing about school shootings and mass shootings and serial killers and horrible things going on. And all you can do is be informed. But what people get wrong is being informed in these situations is not enough, because you can know that serial killers are out there, but if one is in your house, you don't know what to do. Now, I am nowhere along the lines trained and ready to actually face an altercation where my life's in danger. But what I do is I keep myself in good shape. I do Muay Thai training. I would eventually like to move to Jiu-Jitsu and MMA and stuff like that. So that way I'm very aware of what my body is capable of, and I'm used to being in a fight where people are trying to hurt me. I have my Canadian firearms safety certification, which means that I am allowed to shoot guns in a caliber. I need my possessions license eventually. I'm only holding off on that because I am a broke college student, and this costs money, and owning guns costs money. But I do plan on getting that eventually and practicing shooting. Now, I'm not allowed to carry a knife or anything for self-defense reasons, because in Canada, that means that you bought an item with the intention of using it for self-defense, which is not allowed. But if there's a baseball bat in your room somewhere because you played baseball once when you were a teenager and you beat someone to death with it because they got in your house, that's fine. So, there are knives in my house that I keep for decoration because they're cool and rare. Will I use them if someone gets in my house? Probably. Because I'm reasonable and I understand that if they have a gun or a knife, I need an equalizer. Because I would rather be more prepared than a criminal. And people who think that that's a bad idea, I hope they never get faced with a criminal.
Do you think guns and tools for self-defense, as I think you called them, are they to be used only for that? Or do you think that, do you have any other purpose in mind for learning how to shoot a gun? Do you want to be a hunter, a marksman, or anything like that? Is it a sport also to you?
Not to me. It is. I absolutely believe it is a sport, and I think the people who are sport shooters should absolutely be allowed to do what they do. I view it as, I do want to try hunting, and I really value the idea of, I don't believe humans nowadays can be self-sufficient, or at least not in Western culture of North America. Nobody really truly knows how to keep themselves alive. No one really truly knows what it's like to not eat, or to be able to create their own food, not just go to fucking Loblaws and buy it, because that's not what it is to be an animal and stay alive. So I'm not going to hunt to sustain myself, because that's impractical with how many animals are actually left in North America. It's just not feasible. So I am aware of that, and I'm not going to go out and just wipe a population of deer out to sustain myself, because that's not fair. But what I am going to do is I'm going to try and treat it like a discipline and view it as a way of bettering myself. It's incredibly difficult to actually understand your gun, and what people understand is the basics of how it works, but the actual application of it is something that people who have actually shot guns can tell you is it's incredibly difficult, and it takes a lifetime of understanding to really truly, it's one thing to have a gun on you, but it's another thing when there's a moving target who also has a gun shooting back at you for you to pull it out, apply it, and shoot them where they need to be shot to stop them. Like, that's near impossible. And the fact that police officers can do it is incredible. And people also don't... The one thing I hear a lot is, like, whenever a police officer shoots somebody committing a crime, people are like, shoot them in the legs, or why do you have to shoot them so many times? Because bullets don't kill people instantly like you see in movies. Like, unless it's, like, a perfect headshot right through, like, the cerebellum. Like, no, they're going to keep moving around. They're going to keep shooting you. It's a really bloody mess, and people nowadays are really not comfortable with death and blood, and they don't really understand what... I'm going to use the term natural, what natural violence looks like, but guns aren't technically natural, but...
No, they're technology.
Yeah, but I'm also taking into account, like, just a hand-to-hand altercation. Like, people don't realize how primal and violent they can be until they're put in that situation. And it's... You need to be aware of where we came from as a species, because we are not that far removed from the rest of animals. We just think we are.
I mean, that's true. Like, I think not a lot of people really understand or, like, think actively about the fact that humans are animals. But I think to you it's also the fact that human behavior is not that different from animal behavior. So what do you think about, like, do you ever feel like you're stuck in, like, a modern developing world where, you know, you don't, like, does it ever get too much to kind of disagree with society in that way?
Absolutely. Like, I do. I mean, I am aware that the only reason I can have these opinions is because I'm in a culture where I'm able to, you know, sustain myself and stay alive because my family had an opportunity to provide an education to me and keep me well fed so my brain could develop and stuff like that. But yeah, I do believe that the modern world is pretending to be what's the right path and where humans were supposed to go, when I'm not entirely sure about that. And I do find myself disagreeing with just about every political and moral stance there is in the book. And that's why it's really hard to explain what I believe, because it just kind of... I have to use the words I'm familiar with, and they're not always right on with what I actually am trying to express. Like, saying that in the gun debate I'm on this side as opposed to that side is the simple answer, and it's the only way to get the laws that I think are the closest to correct passed, which is very unfortunate. But it's not really what the case is, because do I believe the state's stance on guns is correct? Not entirely. I think it's not wrong. I just think it's not right. I think Canada's got it pretty close. I just don't think we need to make any more regulations, and that's what I'm trying to fight in Canada. Is, like, I think we're good where we're at. Like, so anyone who doesn't understand Canadian firearm registrations, like, so you have to get your basic certification if you just want to be able to shoot basically just shotguns and rifles. I mean, I could go through the list of mechanics, but unless there's gun nuts listening, that doesn't really mean anything. And then if you want to get, like, handguns or so yeah, and then if you want to get handguns or I forget what the other limitation is. I think it's shotguns with pistol grips. You have to get the advanced version. I'm blanking on what the name is at the moment. And then there's also a third one, which is basically for, like, exotic weapons and collectors, and you need, like, basically a government given license. Like, they only handed them out so many of, like, the rights to possess those kinds of weapons, and that's really far out there. That's like if you want bayonets from, like, 1812 or some shit, like, you know, you're not going to be fighting with it. It's a collector's item, but it's really rare and it could be considered dangerous.
Oh, really? So that's not just, like, a historical artifact? That's, like, an actual...
You could kill someone with it. Yeah. It's still a sharp blade.
Yeah.
Or at least if you keep it sharp. And I mean, like, black powder guns are absolutely lethal. Like, but people can collect them. There's a thing called grandfathering, which is if you own a gun of a certain type before it's made illegal, you get to keep it. But if it's ever sold or that person dies, then it's forfeit and it gets destroyed.
Whoa.
So if it's not considered rare enough to be in a museum, it gets destroyed, and that means that's removed from the world forever because the government doesn't like those guns. Which is really unfortunate because that's part of somebody's life. Like, somebody used that for something. Like, there's tons of family heirlooms of people who fought in the world wars that have just been, like, absolutely annihilated by the world's governments because they don't want to talk about it.
But, I mean, like, is that also a discussion of safety? Like, if those guns could be used for not their intended purpose?
Are you really afraid of gangsters firing flintlock pistols at you?
I mean, I definitely don't know enough about them.
The answer is you should be worried about safety in the regard that if it gets loaded with black powder and gets dropped, it could go off because it's a concussion-based weapon, as in, like, it's the impact of the metal hitting the powder that causes the ignition, which means that if enough impact happens, it'll cause a spark and light it. Yeah, like, that's a risk, but as far as it falling into the wrong hands, I mean, theoretically, a really intelligent kid could commit suicide with it, but, you know, they'd have to understand how to load that weapon, and if they get that far, like, this is where I have my stance on, there's a lot of mental health steps that should have been taken before we got to here, because if a kid knows how to load a flintlock pistol to kill himself, he also knows how to tie a knot to hang himself. Like, we're not talking about a gun issue anymore. We're talking about a mental health issue.
Okay. That is a very controversial thing to say, which
it's
I know...
It's also true.
Yeah, I know that that's definitely your area.
Yeah. I'm going to be very controversial, but if you think what I just said is wrong, I would like you to analyze how difficult it is to tie a knot. Well, it's really fucking easy.
I will leave that to the people that are listening.
Yeah.
I do want to transition because you did mention earlier, and I didn't pick up on it because I had a few other questions, that it seems like your stance on self-protection also has a lot to do with fitness. So do you want to talk a bit about that? Because I know that you talked about fitness as in fighting.
Yeah. So I first want to clarify that when it comes to self-defense, I also run a lot. Because if you're going to be realistic about self-preservation, you don't train to fight people. You train to protect yourself. And, you know, every situation is different and you can't run away from bullets. But if you can leave a situation, you absolutely should do that. So, people who say that, you know, if I ever got in a fight, I would just run away, but never run, you know, you can say that you're going to run, but on the day of, when you're in tight jeans and you're in a hoodie and you're kind of drunk and you've just been eating junk food and then the dude tries to chase you with a knife, you're going to run for about 20 seconds and then you're going to stop because you're tired. And now you're out of breath and there's a dude with a knife. And now you're going to die. I train myself to be able to, so that I'm able to handle any situation that's given to me. You don't rise to the occasion when adrenaline kicks in. You drop to your lowest form of training, and for the vast majority of the population, that is 0. And they go to the fight or flight, which is throw a haymaker punch or run away, which is basically a coin flip of if it's going to work. And then if there's a knife or a gun involved, now you're looking at really bad odds. I'm still not good at fighting. I've done a couple like in-house fights, which is basically just amped up sparring, like where it's like we're not trying to inflict permanent damage on each other. We're just hitting each other hard enough that you understand that, like, oh, that punch would have knocked me out. Like, yeah. You're like, you know, it's like, oh, I just lost. But then you keep going and it's just amped up and it hurts a lot. And you're going to hurt for a few days, but that's what it is. I care about fitness and health a lot, so fighting provides that. But I also stay fit and healthy so I can fight if I ever need to. So it's kind of like a circle of feeding itself. Like I also mind my food and my consumption of things. I smoked a lot of weed in high school and like getting out of high school. I drank a lot, like, you know, what teenagers do. And I'm now looking back at that and realizing, like, as much as I have enjoyed substance use, and I still will on the odd occasion, I'm going to cut back on that. Oh, I have been. I've been sober at least sober from alcohol for almost 6 to 8 months now.
Has it?
I think so, because it's been most of the summer, including the school year. But anyways, and I've moved for weed. I've stopped the smoking aspect of it to preserve my lungs as best as possible, because that's the worst impact that weed has. Obviously, there's brain developmental stuff, but that's a bridge that's kind of already been crossed, so I can't really do much about it. But it's, you know, it's really tiny things about understanding your body that can change a lot. So, yeah, I do view it as self-defense-ness, but it's also just, you know, if that never happens, well, at least I'm still healthy. I'm going to live longer, and I'm going to be happier. Like, I'm not doing it because I think I'm going to get jumped. I'm doing it because it is good for me, and it also prepares me.
I mean, like, none of what, or very, very little of what you've just said has anything to do with, like, aesthetics or beauty or, like, appearances. So I'm wondering what you think about, like, you know, Instagram models who flaunt how much they can bench press and, like, are always at the gym in, like, you know, fucking Nike or whatever, Adidas track pants. Like, trying to show off how strong they are. Is that part of it for you? It doesn't seem like it is.
So there are two parts to that, which is, if you're an Instagram model or any other kind of model, congrats, you're hot. Good for you. You know, for the most part, you won the genetic lottery and then improved it, which is, you know, people always say that if you try hard enough, you can beat raw talent. But the reality is that professional anything, NBA, shooter, hockey player, model, it means you were born with raw talent and worked. And less so for Instagram models, but, you know, like, Victoria's Secret models are freaks of fucking nature, and, you know, anyone who's trying to change their body to appear like them is gonna have a rough time of it. Now you said they show off their bench presses. Most Instagram models don't do bench presses, but if they're showing off how impressive their bench press is, and I think you're talking about certain people I've shared on Instagram that you've witnessed, which are some very jacked girls that are also beautiful. But the main thing I'm expressing is that these are girls who would be considered Instagram models, but they break world records in lifting.
No, just to be clear, I was specifically talking about fitness models, like people who are fitnessy and gain a following on, like, being attractive and fitnessy. So
the answer is, I hate them because, you know, getting paid to just look good is kind of a dumb idea. I do value that they take care of their bodies, and for the most part, I mean, sometimes they're just jumping on diet trends, but, you know, they are trying to be healthy, and that's the effort that's attractive. Like, people always, you know, assume that disliking plus-sized people, specifically women, but, you know, people, is, you know, an aesthetic thing, and for a lot of people it is, but for a lot of people it's also just the application of effort. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, even if effort is applied, it's not perceived. And sometimes people, if they can't perceive something, just don't believe it's there at all. And that's a hard stigma to get over. But, you know, so I'm going to jump. So in the UFC, there's a guy named Mark Hunt, which is just this big, tubby New Zealand guy who's just, like, all swole up in people's business. And he just throws fucking haymakers and knocks people the fuck out. You can be big and be great at fighting and be healthy. Like, you can have great cardio and be big. You can do backflips, you can do jumps, you can do parkour, you can do whatever. But if he wasn't famous, he's just some fat dude from New Zealand.
Right.
I'm not saying it's right to just assume that plus-size people don't apply effort. I'm just saying, for most of society, the reason that the aesthetic is abs and tight butts and good legs and, you know, just a well put together physique is because it shows effort, it shows discipline, it shows a lot of soft skills and traits that just aren't apparent on the other side of things. So it just, not only does it mean that you're able to do more adventurous things like do lots of climbing and running and stuff, which is what a lot of people in our generation now want to do. A lot of people in our generation are looking for those active outdoorsy activities. But it's also, it reveals a lot about your mental state and what your priorities are.
Okay. So you seem to think that, or like, it sounds like you're saying that the perception that is trying to be changed through like body positivity, that kind of movement, is like a red herring.
I have no problem with body positivity, but I have a problem with lying about health. And a lot of the body positive community just states things like, I'm plus size because I have a condition. And which if that is the truth, then you are the exception. And I don't get why you're stressing about, what I'm saying. But for a lot of people, they have a condition because of their health. And it's, if you say that you are oversized because of a condition, but it's a condition you were not born with, or let me correct that, because you can, there's things like car accidents and you can develop conditions without having anything to do with weight or health. But so if it's something that was out of your control that you could have just fixed by eating slightly better and going to the gym once a week, I don't like the gym. Just to clarify, I think gyms are dumb. So I don't go to the gym. I just do my training and I run and I do sit-ups in my basement. But if it's something that was out of your control, body positivity is absolutely something you should advocate for. Like, be proud with the skin you have and do what you can to improve your skin, to improve your hairstyle, how you present yourself, get off makeup or on makeup if that's what you want to do. Do whatever you can to advocate for your appearance and advocate for your appeal with your condition. If you're somebody who developed a condition because of behaviors you had, either as a child or as an adult, such as diabetes, there are tons of people who have been 600 plus pounds and fixed it. You are in a rut. And you are lying to yourself about other people being the ones who put you there. It is unfortunate, but if you are going to look at me and say that all of society is the reason that you are fat, I'm going to look at you and say, your perception of society is what it makes you think that.
I don't think I agree with you, and the only reason I'm mentioning that is because I think the body positivity movement is like what you said when you were talking about Victoria's Secret models. It's just making sure that people stop comparing themselves to those freaks of nature, as you put it. Those like beautiful, tall, fit women who are, one specific body type of person. I think it's sort of just like, I don't think the point of a lot of people who are encouraging body positivity is like, oh, it's okay to be lazy. I think it's them just saying, go at your own pace. Do what you need to do. Be comfortable with yourself in the moment, because if you're not comfortable with yourself now, you're not going to be comfortable with yourself later. So I just want to call out that misperception a little, and I want you to explain it a little more.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to the Victoria's Secret thing because, yeah, they're tall, which is natural. They didn't improve that. They have very pretty faces. They're very, even and aesthetically pleasing. But you said fit. Do they not work out a lot? Some of them have eating disorders to try and maintain the look that they're supposed to, and that's horrible. Mm-hmm. I would love it if the most valued aesthetic was, jacked men and women who are clearly, some of them are freaks of nature, like LeBron James, but some of them are just, 5'2" girls who decided they wanted to be big one day and never stopped. They just decided to eat a lot of fucking protein and work out, and they got fucking huge. And that's awesome, because we are animals. And the real life no lie factor is that if you take all of society away, the people who survive are the ones who know how to work and improve themselves and know what to do to take care of their body. And it's those big, healthy people that actually understand how to do that. Now, the body positive community, you says go at your own pace. The problem is again, if you're not somebody who is given a condition out of your control, you're not doing anything. You know, you haven't set a pace. You know, if you're 600 pounds, you can't go run, you can't do Muay Thai, but you can walk. You can walk upstairs. Like, you can do stuff. There's a lot of people, particularly in America, that I've witnessed who have, like, the carts, like the electric little motorbikes things. Like, you've given up. Like, you're literally, like, you're a watcher in life. Like, you can't do anything. You can't go on rides. And this whole, like, I shouldn't have to pay for a second seat thing, it's like, we didn't make you need a second seat. Like, we can try and make different seats. That is something we can do. But, you know, we all start out relatively the same size. Like, some people are born to be 7 foot and 300 pounds. And that's why I don't like weight as a factor of, like, health. Because, you know, you can be big and be healthy. That's why I say fat. I don't say a weight, meaning fat. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, if your baseline is 200 pounds and then you get fat and you're like 300 pounds, that's like kind of fat. Because if you start at 150 and you go to 180, that's the same comparison because you're naturally somebody who stores fat, which in history meant that you stayed alive because that's what it took. And that's why with the foods we have nowadays, people gain weight so much, which is why I just want them to try harder because the odds are against you. If you don't try, you're going to gain weight and you're going to get unhealthy. And you're going to develop heart conditions. And that's the one thing that really fucking scares me. Is because hearts are so weird.
Do you think, just one last question, and then I think we're going to change this. Do you think that you have an unfair assumption that people who are of a larger weight are lazy? Do you think that, like, that's a stereotype that you have, or that, like, that's something that you just assume of people?
No, as I just said, it's the people who say that society needs to adapt to them that applies to. You can be, if you're 600 pounds, you may have been lazy, but if you work to even lose any amount of that weight to improve your lifestyle and to be healthier, well, you might be lazier than some people, but nobody is absolutely lazy. Well, very few people are absolutely lazy, but any form of improvement is something. Like, you know, if you've lived as a overweight person since the age of 15 till 30, you've kind of done some irreversible damage to your body. Like, your longevity has absolutely been affected. There's things about you that will probably never go back. You'll probably have like those large skin flaps that you always see on the internet when people share their stories. But are you lazy? Absolutely not. You don't go from that amount of weight to what we quote unquote call normal by being lazy. You have to work at that. And there's a lot of steps that it takes to do that. Because it's not just working out and doing crunches and starving yourself. You have to, like, actually, well, if you're going to sustain it, you know, you can just develop an eating disorder and drop a shit ton of weight, but, you know, you're not going to stay that way. And that's a horrible thing to do. But you can eat healthy and do crunches and walk, and it may take years, but eventually you'll be healthy. And that's not lazy. Like, what's being lazy is not having habits or not having good habits. It's just being sedentary. That's the word I like. I don't like sanitary. I love sanitary people. I don't like sedentary people. Because if at any point in your life you think you're exactly the way you're supposed to be, like, how did that happen? Like, how did you decide that there was no changes left that you need to make? You decided you're perfect? Because if you've decided you're perfect, you're the problem. You're the one who has a problem with how people view themselves. Because you don't think there's ever a change that needs to be. There's nobody who's perfect. Anyone who thinks they don't need change is horribly misguided.
Okay, that's...
Boom.
Okay. we're gonna shift for a bit, because I had a question about, you seem like you're very much of an individualist, and so I kind of wanted to know about like why that came about and where that comes from, and to what extent. Like, you can talk about any other topics or themes in this case. I really want to find like a deep example of how you became this way, or you believe this way.
Well, I just kind of believe that, like, again, we are animals, and if you, like, the one person that I can truly rely on is myself. Like, I have my family, I have my friends, and they're all people who I can turn to for help. But when it comes down to, like, the actual application of who you are as a person, there's really only you. And you're the only one who can actually understand, like, what you're capable of and what changes you can make. And so when I look at other people, I think they may need my help right now, but I cannot let them be dependent on me. Because if they're dependent on me, that means they are not self-sufficient.
Which means you can't depend on them.
Also true, but that's not my main concern. Mm-hmm. I try not to be dependent on anyone. And so if you want to get into the bigger picture of things, when it comes to like government intervention, like, should there be mental health assistance? Absolutely. Those are conditions you cannot change. Those are conditions you have to deal with. But the change, and I don't know where this level is, and that's impossible to figure out, should only be enough to allow that person to be self-sufficient in their own life. If somebody needs to be put in a permanent care ward for their entire life, they are an extreme case. Most people, even with birth issues, which is what a mental illness is, you know, it's usually
in your DNA.
It's in your DNA and then brought on by trauma.
Yeah.
Genuinely. Wow, I cannot speak today. Generally. But most of the world's population can be given an opportunity to be self-sufficient. They just need the information and time to do it. And I do believe that there's a lack of resources for many communities, like lower socioeconomic status or SES. But they, like, it's pretty easy to just get resources and information to those communities, and it may take a decade or two for them to permanently set in, but I don't understand why that's such a hard idea. And the left claims to be the ones that are trying to do that, but they're irresponsibly spending money that they don't have. And that's only going to bring on the downside. What you need to privatize the industry of helping people. If I'm trying to be self-sufficient, I can only dedicate my life to helping people so much before I need to make money to survive, because that's where the world's at, and I don't like that, but I have to, because that's where I am, you know? I don't get to just go out and hunt deer with a stick and let that be my life. But if you incentivize me and say, here's all the things you will ever need to be self-sufficient because you helped people, boom. Now what you've done is you've made it valuable to be someone who helps people. And they do that for doctors, they do that for police officers, but what they don't do is they very little do it for therapy, and they very, very little do it for rec and leisure. Little bit of self-promotion here, but we are the ones who build community centers and support groups and brand new programming and get resources and activities. Everything that you see in your community that involves keeping you distracted from what the world is doing wrong is us. We prevent crime before it happens because we teach kids active, healthy lifestyles that can bring them up into proper adulthood. We prevent health issues by getting people to be mentally and physically aware of where their bodies are at and what they can be capable of. We prevent so many things when properly applied, and yet are so put off to the side. We are capable of doing so much respite work and like application of personal skills, but unfortunately, there's no value. Like, you either have to sell your soul and be like a caseworker, for like, for example, like a homeless population. Like, if you want to work with them, you will be, making ends meet for the rest of your life. And you will dedicate your entire life to helping people who nobody else cares about.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can graduate from Rec and Leisure and go work on cruise ships and get into an old folks home and, get a nice cushy recreation programming job and make a fuck ton of money.
Yeah. So in the program that is supposed to be doing the most outreach, you're saying the industry itself is kind of locking its way out of proper outreach. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying the industry has been forced to tell you that you have to pick a path. And once you pick that path, you have to suffer the consequences of what you've picked. If you're wise enough to understand that scraping by is fine as long as you know that you've morally done your obligation to help somebody, then you know which path you're going to pick. Mm-hmm. If you're somebody who believes that you need to succeed drastically in the economic sense and be able to set up a family and children and give them all the resources they need, you have to make a different decision. Mm-hmm. If you're someone like me and you're somewhere in the middle, you have to think outside the box.
Right.
And that's what I've been trying to do.
So do you want to talk a little bit about how you've done that?
Well, I am in college, which means I've kind of caved and gone back into the box. Yeah. When I graduated high school, I took 2 gap years because I hate school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I'm currently working with a company that I won't disclose the name of just because I don't know if that's cool or not. I'll disclose the company. I just won't go into like details about it. But so it's called Spark Life Care. Basically, it takes pretty cool people, like I think I am, and it gets us. It checks to see if we're able to apply soft skills like patience, adaptability, empathy, and it finds people from all sorts of different lifestyles, like people with mental illnesses like autism or Tourette's, people with brain injuries, seniors who are in the long-term care phase but aren't in a facility, so they need companions, and they pair us up based on compatibility, and basically we provide companionship. We are like therapy dogs, but we're people. Like, we are simply put there to provide people with a better life and give them opportunities to do whatever they want. And that's amazing. Like, so there's a lot of leeway because I'm technically an independent contractor, which means, like, for the most part, I get to pick my own hours. I get to pick my own clients. They pick me too. And like when I'm with them, it's whatever they want to do really and whatever I want to do. Like, it's, if I'm with a kid and they want to go to a trampoline park, we go to a trampoline park. We hang out, and that may not seem therapeutic, and sometimes I wonder how I get paid for that. But it is, because for that kid, there may be a reason that having me around makes the difference.
Yeah.
And people, I'm going to keep saying on the left just because, it's the generalization that I have to make. Sorry about absolutes. I do hate them, but I have to use them. Claim that they're the empathetic side. But the reality is like, I'm building somebody up. I'm not making them rely on me. Their life is not set around me showing up for work. Mm-hmm. What I am doing is showing them that there are people who care. There are people who are interested in you. There are tons of things that you can do. And I will do everything in my benefit to make their life easier.
That's a very, non-right-wing thing to say, or non-stereotypically right-wing is what I should say.
Yeah, well, I also hate the right. So you know what? Yeah.
I think at least from what I know about you, is what you really hate is hypocrisy.
Absolutely.
So I think it's comforting for people who might identify themselves as being on the left to kind of hear that from you, that or from anybody to hear that you're critical of both of the common sides that we hear about.
why is that important to you?
To be critical of the sides?
Yeah. To be critical of everybody.
Because I believe that the idea that there's only two sides is what's led us to what the correct answers are being misplaced. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is that both sides have some correctness about them, and both sides have some things very, very wrong with them. Mm-hmm. So the two-party system is the best analogy I can have, which is, let's say you start with 6 political parties in a country. People vote for who they want, but as the years go by, you'll see who the clear winners are, and you'll start voting for the party that is closest to winning while being most similar with what you value. Yeah. And then you gradually move towards two parties. This is what's happened in the States, and this is what's slowly happening in Canada.
I mean, I think that also has a little bit to do with the voting system that we have, but
yeah, but that's too in depth to go into. Yeah, that's absolutely a very complicated issue.
Continue.
But so what's happened is you'll see internationally political platforms become two-partied, and they become what we call the right and the left. Mm. It happens in different countries with different cultures and different values, and yet it still becomes the right and the left. Mm-hmm. And what I view that as is just like you've whittled down the amount of political parties, you've whittled down the amount of trails of logic to go down. And what you've done is you've said, yeah, this kind of makes sense, but if you don't vote for it, you're voting for that. And you don't think that's right, do you? And you're basically telling people, look, there are 15,000 different issues in politics of things that you should care about, but here are the top 5, and you got to pick which side you're on, because if you don't, they're what's considered the important issues, and if you don't vote for them, the bad stuff happens.
Yeah.
And for the left, that's like, guns getting passed, and, tax breaks for the big businesses and all that stuff, which, whatever, and immigrants aren't allowed to come into the country. And for the right, it's that they have to pay a fuck ton for people that they don't know in healthcare and benefits and stuff like that, and they have to let new people into the country, and they don't get to keep their guns anymore. And the reality is, well, maybe you should be allowed guns, but immigrants probably should be allowed into the country, and big businesses probably should get some tax breaks, but so should any business. Mm-hmm. So, those are some very complicated topics that, there's some pretty easy answers to if you really stop and, follow the trail of logic and evidence to. But, each side had to be different enough to attract its own populations, and now we're stuck with, neither side really gets it right.
Mm-hmm. And so people
except the right.
People are being pigeonholed into like one category of person or one category of political identity, I guess, instead of actually getting things done.
Yeah, pretty much. So like the reality is like party systems don't really get much done in politics anymore. Mm-hmm. So I am just faced with the reality that I just need to speak the logical truth, and if it pisses people off, that's fucking sucky for them, because I know that I can back up with what I say with the evidence that I've been given, and if I'm wrong, it means that I haven't had information given to me about why I'm wrong. And as soon as I am going to turn around on that belief to whatever that logical trail leads. Mm-hmm. Like, I will change my mind on just about anything if I'm given the correct information. But if I am talking about a topic with you and you say something that every political person on either side has said about, like, if it's rhetoric, like if I'm speaking to somebody who would say they're on the left about guns, and they just, they bring up a specific shooting, I'm going to be like, fuck you. That's not new information. Like, are you pretending I didn't know about that? Mm-hmm. Like, no. Like, I also watch the news, doofus. Like, yeah, I know about that. That's not going to change my mind. You can make your argument on that, whatever you want. But if you're going to look at me and you're going to make an intelligent argument about, well, if you know there's a mental health issue, maybe you shouldn't be okay with guns. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go, oh, that's a really good argument. And I'm going to sit down, I'm going to think, and I'm going to be like, is that the logical trail? Now, for those of you out there, the reason I just made that argument is because I've also thought of that myself. And so, no, I don't think that's the case. I'm just putting that out there. But, don't come at me with the same old damn arguments that politicians make, because they're all idiots. Why do you care what they say? Come up with your own opinions, please.
You seem to believe that there's one singular logic. Like, there's one singular path for logic.
I believe every problem has at least one answer. And at least one most correct answer. Mm-hmm. There are probably very few problems out there that have an absolute 100% guaranteed correct answer, as in, like, this is what the one thing we need to do is. There are a lot of problems that are moral based, and I think a lot of things wrong with humans is that we make arguments from morality when morality is an exclusive human thing. Mm-hmm. Animals don't have morality. And that's why society is so complicated, is because people argue based on rights and privileges, not based on what are hard facts. Not saying morality shouldn't be a thing, just saying it's not a good way to start your argument, bro. Like, you know, you need to tell me why. If you're going to make a moral argument, you need to tell me why that moral value is good for society. Mm-hmm. Like, paying for post-secondary education sounds like a horrible idea, but if you make the argument that it makes the population more intelligent as a whole scale, that's a really good argument. Because that tells me that, like, yeah, maybe these teenagers just getting out of high school who are idiots don't deserve my money and don't, like, why should I pay for them to go to school? But
maybe it'll make society better.
Exactly. If it's going to make society better in the long run and it's going to make those people more adaptable to understand the complexities of life, now you're really speaking my language, because that's a way of saying, look, by you forfeiting this money, you could improve an entire next generation. Mm-hmm. That's a good reason to say, based on a moral basis, which is just, you know, people should have the right to go to school.
I have a quick side question about your statement of morality, in the sense that no other animal has it. But I mean, all animals have societies, they have interpersonal relationships, they have behavior. So why would you assume, or why, based on your logic, do they not have morality?
Because there's a difference between being intelligent enough to understand that codependence is a benefit to survival and changing one's environment and processing of information to ensure that you view yourself as a difference in the universe. Mm. Like, dolphins don't go around saying, well, we don't kill other dolphins because that's wrong. They go around saying, we don't kill other dolphins because if a shark shows up, we need those dolphins to tell it to fuck off. You know, it just makes sense. There is, well, I don't know what dolphins do. Maybe they do that. But if they do that, they're also wrong.
Philosophical, you know? Maybe they just run around talking about Socrates and Aristotle, and
they also like talking about old white men.
Yeah. They can understand us.
But most animals that have societies have a very simple reason for it, which is it's efficient. Mm-hmm. And I mean, having societies is actually not a sign of intelligence at all. Ants are incredibly sophisticated in their societies, and they're basically like all under a same mindset sometimes. Mm-hmm. But they're kind of stupid. Like, they just, like, what do? Tell me one thing they do that is considered intelligent.
I mean,
yeah,
they have an exoskeleton.
That's not intelligent. That's just a good evolution trait. They build with sand. That's kind of cool. If you're an architect, guess what? Ants can do it too.
Oh, wow.
But, like, we have tons of proof that society does not mean you're smart. So why are we making arguments that based on, like, morality, which is basically just what's good for society, quote unquote, is like that's not a good basis. What you need to make is an intelligent argument, and if it supports morality, that's a bonus.
Okay.
Sometimes morality is a benefit, but it's also just misplaced a lot.
Okay, well, I feel a tiny bit roasted.
I mean,
so we're gonna move on.
You came at me saying that, like, you know, I was attacking morality. You don't get to ask counter questions and not expect to get the counter result.
No, I was hoping for exactly that.
Counterspell.
Yeah, there you go. Counterattack. You seem also very critical of democracy. So I think some of the arguments that you've been making about efficiency can be construed or misconstrued depending on how you perceive it as very socialist or communist. So I want to know what your thoughts are about that.
Socialism is often called the thing that looks best on paper, but doesn't work in reality. Democracy is also that. It just kind of works. I do believe democracy is the best political system that's been invented so far, as in, like, it's the best for humans. But I don't believe it's the solution, and I do think it's incredibly inefficient. Problem is as you get a larger population, democracy becomes... First off, the independent vote becomes gradually irrelevant. And then the selection of people applies on a much grander basis. So when you're looking at who your candidates are, you're now talking about this person representing this many billion instead of this many thousand. And, democracy between 100 people is really easy because you can see everyone that's voting. And, they're all in your tribe, and so you know them, and so you understand why they're voting the way they are. When somebody across Canada disagrees with you, it's easy to just Facebook post about how shitty they are and attack them. But India is a democracy of 1 billion people, and it is incredibly inefficient. It takes them a fucking month just to get votes.
Well, they also have, I think, an average of 60 political parties.
Yeah.
Which is just a whole complicated thing in itself.
But do you know how many parties it takes to make up 70% of, like, their political system? 3.
Yeah.
3 parties make up 70% of their system. They are gradually moving towards the same system that Canada has.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
And Canada is gradually moving towards what the states have, which is bad.
Democracy is very swampy, I think.
The reality is that the idea of a monarch or dictator is the most efficient political system. The problem is that the forms of selection are horrible. Like birthright, no, you can be a fucking genius, but if your kid is not a genius just because you are, like there's
especially if there's incest.
I mean, yeah, you could just go the European route and fucking fuck your cousins until not only are they not intelligent, but they also, like, can't see. And, that's not a great king because you can't speak for the people if you can't talk. Look, yeah, so that's not a great place. And then dictator is basically just, I have the biggest army, so I'm in charge, which is, very efficient, just not very good for the people in practice, because it does imply that the only time a dictator leaves is when there's another army that shows up. And, history has shown that when there's 2 armies around, it usually means the local population dies. So that's a thing. I do believe that there's theoretically a way of selecting leaders. Like, I feel like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Elon Musk should just be, like, made president. I don't think intelligence is the base level either. I just think creativity and, like, the idea, like, you should, if you're able to grasp, like, concepts and understand people's realities, I feel like you should just, like, be a leader and, like, have influence. That's why Elon is a businessman. Hey, Trump, you're also a businessman.
But you suck. No, we're not going to say that. We're not going to alienate a potential audience.
I will say, if you are a Trump supporter, I don't hate you. If you're a Hillary supporter, I don't hate you. I just hate your system. I understand that maybe you just had to vote for one of them, or maybe you genuinely believe in what they do, but you were also given a premise from the get-go that it had to be one or the other, and that is a very unfortunate thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have said time and time again, if I had been there for that election, I genuinely don't know who I would have voted for, and because of my disdain for politicians, it very well might have been Trump.
Yeah.
That being said, he's still the worst politician, or the worst country leader on the planet right now, and that includes Putin. And Kim Jong-un.
Oof, wow. Wow. And, I mean, that's probably just because both Putin and Kim Jong-un are smarter than he is.
Yeah, I get they're horrible
least they
people,
know,
but
like,
they're,
yeah.
Well, if they're not good at what they do, they're at least surrounded by people who are good at executing what they want.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's so many fucked governments in the world right now. Like China's fucked, North Korea's fucked, Russia's kind of fucked, America's very fucked, Canada's getting fucked. I mean, and then you just go to Africa and there's a lot of not even governments. So there's that. There's like, people say there's like 200 countries in the world, but a lot of them are just kind of like pretending to be present. South America too is becoming a shit show. Like everyone shits on Africa, but like South America is slowly going downhill.
I mean, it has drastically improved since the middle of the 20th century. Like after World War II, at least Latin America was considered to be America's backyard, where they could just like do
Store
anything.
cocaine.
Yeah, and like, you know, overthrow governments and kill people and stuff.
Yeah, but the amount of socialist dictators that are forming down there is baffling.
I mean, that's just a repercussion of what the U.S. tried to do there, like in the 60s and 70s, like during the Nixon era.
Is that a repercussion of what the states tried to do, or is that the natural spread of bad ideas?
I don't know. I don't know anyone who could answer that question. I
can
think
answer
I'm-
that question.
okay,
It's
fine.
both. I'm not saying the states is innocent there, but I don't think they played as big a role as people accuse them of.
Okay, yeah, that's...
I'd say they're 30% responsible.
Oh, okay. Wow. I would disagree with the percentage, but we don't have
I
to
know.
talk about that.
This is about me.
For now.
Tune in next week when it's about Emma.
Oh no. Soon it's gonna be about neither of us, so we're just getting
I wouldn't say soon. I would just say
soonish.
eventually.
Soon enough, yeah.
There will be guests on here eventually, and eventually you'll see me and Emma working together to interview people as opposed to just yelling at each other.
I don't think we're yelling at each other.
We're getting loud,
Yeah,
but
we're
it's
getting
fun loud.
We're just loud.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I asked you the first question was because I just assume, or a lot of people just assume, that white guys know everything about the Second World War.
Ugh, yeah.
So, what do you think about stereotypes?
I fucking hate stereotypes so much. People just assume that because I'm a middle-class white guy that all of the opinions coming out of my mouth are based on rhetoric and stereotyping of other people. Mm-hmm. I mean, the reality is like, I went to school in like, I mean, it wasn't like garbage, but it was like, you know, not an amazing area, and you know, there was some sketchy shit going on, and I played football with guys who were from arguably one of the worst neighborhoods in Ottawa. People don't realize that Ottawa has a lot of bad areas. There's a lot of drug-related crimes and gang violence. There are shootings in Ottawa, and not just like down on Rideau. That, you know, they happen all over. So I've been privy to a lot of exposure, I would say, of different populations. I mean, Ottawa is praised as being one of the cities that brought in the most Syrian refugees. Mm-hmm. So my high school, right as I was leaving it, brought in, I think it was like, in my year, I think it was 80 new students.
Wow.
With entire course adaptions to include their language barrier. Mm-hmm. And I believe, as it stands now, there's about 200 families who have utilized my school's resources in some way or another, whether that be like a donation system, like I donated my old laptop through them, all that, and clothes and all that stuff. But so I've been very exposed to different populations. I would say my community as a neighborhood is probably considered predominantly middle class. I don't want to say white, because I don't think you should call any community a race or color. Mm-hmm. But, you know, because you all out there are going to do it anyways, yes, it's probably predominantly white.
That was an assumption.
It is an assumption, and I said it that way because I want people to understand why I made that assumption, because I want them to think about, like, if they had that thought, I want them to be like, damn, he's right. Like, I did just assume that about him. Mm-hmm. You know, and because, like, and I want them to understand that I said upper middle class and they went white. Like, racism is not about the people actually applying it all the time. Sometimes it's about the people who just assume that if you're upper in life, it's because of your skin color. You know, that is a mentality that is also a problem.
Why do you think that is? Like, do you think that there's no historical precedent for that, and that those, like, I'm just trying to, jiggle all the juices in your brain. That sounded extremely weird. But back on the subject, like, don't you think that assumption has to do with, like, historical precedent and systemic oppression and just, like, the aftermath of that, where you still have, like, lower socioeconomic trends for people of color, or, like, even if that's not true, just the assumption of that fact of that being, don't you think it works on both sides?
So yeah, no, obviously people still have memories about all the stuff. Like, I'm not going to go into historic racism and oppression because there's just too much of a long list to go down. I mean, like, there's too long of a list if you just want to talk about black people or Muslims, or, like, I mean, like, you pick any population, I could go on for fucking ever. Even white people at their own time, have their own fucking shit going on. But, like, so my belief is that in the modern climate in Western society, there is no systemic oppression. So I want people to understand that success is not dictated by your race or color anymore. I genuinely believe that if you don't hold the mentality that somebody a different skin color than you is going to succeed ahead of you if you have the same skill set, I think if you have that mentality, you're going to lose, because you've already assumed that you're going to lose. And that's, like, when you say you apply yourself to sports, you just assume that you're going to win. You assume you're the best, and that's what you do. And that's life too. Like, you have to assume you have a chance to do that. And there are tons and tons of people who have ditched that mentality in what equality has brought, and they have formed the idea that there can be politicians and business leaders and all that who are any color, religion, creed. Look at Singh, the NDP party leader in Canada. He's a Sikh brown man.
Yeah.
Who wears his turban. Well, I knew it was a turban. Sorry. I was just gonna say head wear. Covering? Yeah, because, like, it's so, like, calling it a turban or anything else is just breaking it down, because it's for different religions, it's just a head covering, because Christianity had it too. We have nuns and I said we, like I'm part of it. White people's religion, every culture has some form of garb involved. So I didn't want to generalize it to a turban, because you can wear a turban in different ways. Mm-hmm. So it's, I just wanted to, like, I want people to understand that, like, when you make that assumption about what upper class is, like, you're building a mindset. Like, you get good at a sport or by doing something by practice, and when you practice a certain mentality, you're going to get stuck there. It builds comfort, and when you get comfortable with that, it's dangerous.
Okay. So to kind of counter that, you don't think that...
We're not supposed to debate yet.
Well, no, I'm trying to push you to, like, see how far your
fine with it.
Cognition goes, because I know that it goes quite far, but I want the people who are listening to also understand that. So you don't think that you don't see that what you called it, or what you summed it up to, was the assumption that you're going to fail because you're different. You don't think it has to do with the idea that people of color have to work harder than people, or, like, white people, I guess, to get the same goals.
No,
and you don't believe
so
that
it's socioeconomic status, not color.
Well, can I give you an example?
Sure.
By using Sing. So in Quebec, there's a law called Bill 21, which forbids the wearing of any religious garb in any public office. So that doesn't just mean politician. It means, like, someone who works at the DMV. It means a teacher. It means a bus driver. It means, like, any person who works in any field affiliated to people and to the government. And what Singh had to do when he entered Quebec is, I think that the Quebec government implored him to take off his head covering, as you called it, as it is. And he did, and there's a video of it, and it's him having to forego his, like, religious identity to have a space in politics in a way that no other politician in Canada would have to do right now. You don't see that as, like, imbalanced in his favor because of either his religion, his skin color, his belief system, his, like, you don't see that as unequal.
That's a tough one to answer because I don't have a problem with people wearing religious clothing or symbolism. And the main problem I have with Quebec is that it's on paper not a segregation law, but in practice it is, because they don't apply that towards crosses and people who wear symbols of traditionally white practices. I've also heard that Jewish garb is not critiqued as heavily out there. So my main problem is that it is inherently practiced in a sense of racism and religious intolerance, and that is incredibly wrong. But if everyone in the world got together in one giant world government, there's a lot of religions that have to mesh together. And inherently, if you really want religious freedom, you have to agree that some people expressing their religious freedom would infringe other people's religious beliefs. So I would argue, in a perfect system under an ideal world government, nobody in government should wear or express any form of religious expression. So do I think the law makes sense? Yes. Do I think it is even close to being able to be set up properly and in a way where people can understand why it needs to be in place? Not at all. So I don't think that law is a bad law. I think it is in a bad part of Canada and being executed very poorly, because Quebec has a lot of its own issues and corruption and bias towards its own people. And it's one of the provinces that receives the most amount of support from other provinces while giving very little back in return. They have a lot of strict language laws, which I have a bigger problem with than I do religious laws, because I honestly don't think people have a right to religious freedom. I think they have a privilege of religious freedom. I think if you want to hold in your home and in your heart whatever belief you want, that's fine. But like, to understand that you are allowed to hold a public space and like express yourself, and like that we're supposed to support churches and mosques and stuff like that, I'm not quite entirely behind. I think if you have a church, it should be entirely supported by your community. Like, it should entirely be run by people's donations to keep that building open. It should not be funded in any caliber. And if you want to turn it into a private business, then it's just going to show people what religion is real fast, which is a way of controlling people. I'm not a big fan of religion, so it's very hard to talk about this without bashing people who are religious, because I am fine if you want to believe that, but if you want to look at me and say that other people not liking your religion is a problem, then I'm going to look at you and say, then, like, you picked that religion, or maybe you didn't, but you believe in that religion because of a greater cause or reason and morality. If it is an inconvenience to the point of where you need to speak up about it, is that really a representation of the greater cause? Are you really in it for the right reasons, or are you only in it because it makes your life easier? And I don't think Singh's doing that at all. This is not directed at him at all. It's directed at the general idea that, you don't wear the headscarf because other people are okay with it. You wear it because you believe in it and you follow a religion that has its reasons for its application. And if other people have a problem with that, you need to be the person who goes, hey, fuck you. Like, no, I'm going to keep it on. This is my protest. You're allowed to do that. And honestly, you know, I admire Singh. I think he's one of the better politicians in Canada right now, but he should have fucking kept it on.
Oh, wow.
Like, do I think they're allowed to have that law? Absolutely. Do I think you need to follow it? Fuck no. Protest is, by definition, supposed to be illegal, so the fact that you need to apply for protest is dumb.
I mean, I agree with that final statement. So, I've been taking a little second to kind of think about that, and what it sounds like you're saying, just to kind of, like, see if I can, like, get on the same level and understand things the way you do. It sounds like you're saying that if religion makes you a better person, then that's okay to hold that personal, like, belief, but it's not, I mean, it sounded like you were saying it's not possible to structure society around the complete freedom of religion, and that shouldn't be an expectation.
It's fun. That's basically it. I'm fundamentally saying that if you want to incorporate, like, there's no country in the world right now where every religion is prevalent, and if there was, it would never be peaceful, because some of the biggest religions in the world have fundamental us versus them beliefs, and that is a very, very dangerous thing if you want to have freedom of anything. Like, you can't have freedom of speech and then also have freedom of religion when you have that many religions in one place, because people are naturally going to write and express about their worship, and then you're going to, in the modern culture, offend a bunch of other people. So do I think it is possible to do that? Yes. Do I think it's anywhere near in the modern climate? No. So I'm dealing with what is practical in the moment. We need people to understand that disagreeing with someone's religion and believing that their actions are wrong is not, like, it may be offensive, but that doesn't make it not correct. Like, if somebody does an action in the name of their religion, and and it's a wrong action, I'm not like condemning them because of their religious beliefs. I'm condemning them because their religious beliefs brought them to horrible things. You know, there's tons of religious genocides going on in the world and that have happened in the past. And I mean, the classic, you know, Western point out that I'm going to have to dip into is, like, the Islam aspect of, you know, jihads and the caliphate and all that stuff. Like, that's the most extreme case, but there's all sorts of like, if you go to China if you go to China and the eastern parts of Asia, Muslims are the ones who are getting persecuted and executed and genocided there. And in the West, obviously, there's a lot of stigma around being Muslim and
Islamophobia.
Fuck, it's not Islamophobia.
You don't like that word? Oh,
well, okay, fine.
I didn't realize that.
If you think that's Islamophobia, then I'm also Christian phobia, Jewophobia. Like, fuck all of them by that logic. I'm not I am afraid of them because they're organizations, but I'm not afraid of you because you're Muslim. I'm not afraid of you because you're Christian. I'm afraid because you are part of a collective that if some fucking dude in a big hat said, go kill these people, you'd do it. You know, those are the people I have a problem with. If you're Muslim and you just want to hang out and, you know, live life and be nice to people, and you just also wear a hijab, fucking cool, do whatever. But if you want to go join ISIS and fucking shoot a bunch of people, fuck you. I have a problem with your religious ideology, because you're doing it based on the idea of your superiority because of your religion. I don't have a problem with religion. I have a problem with religious extremism. And it also extends to your preachiness and cult level mentality. Like, if you don't have to, even if you're not killing people, but if you value any human less because they are not your same religion, you're a bad person.
So what do you think of at least, like, extreme right-wing individuals in like the states who take up the mantle of like, oh, America is a Christian nation, to uphold things like freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. And I just I was gonna say the right to bear arms again, but those very I guess Republican ideologies.
Yeah.
Do you agree with them because they want the same things as you, or do you disagree with them even though they want the same things as you?
A little bit of both. I'd say, on a political voter standpoint, I would vote with them because they want the same things as me, but I disagree with them morally in application. I think they're people who, well, at least in those examples that you brought up, they also hold a lot of values that I disagree with. But when it comes to like the right to bear arms and freedom of speech, I do believe that they are people with the correct answers for the wrong reasons, which is entirely something that's possible and has happened many times in history. They got to the same conclusion that I got to, but off of the wrong start point, and that makes their entire argument wrong. But I'm going to vote with them because it's still the correct answer, and we can get rid of their rhetoric once it's in place. Because if it's the correct answer, it's going to stay. About the Christian nation thing, there is no nation on the planet that is a religious nation except for Vatican City, because it is one city that is entirely dedicated to its religion. Every other nation is just a predominantly religious nation that segregates its people. The U.S. is given a lot of shit for being a predominantly Christian nation that is afraid of Muslims and of Sikhs and plenty of other religions. But if you go to the Middle East and you're a Christian and you are a woman and you don't cover your head and you walk around in public, they'll do far worse to you there. And same if you go to the Far East in China and all that. If you hold like traits or ideologies that are strongly opposite to whatever country you're in that has a religious belief, you are going to get treated worse or the same that America treats its differences. It is not a Christian nation. It is a people that is predominantly Christian who are afraid of other people, and that's prevalent all over the world. So I don't think picking on America is fair, but you're right. They're the closest neighbors of ours, and it's easy to get information from them. There's also, we understand their language. I can't listen to a news broadcast from Saudi Arabia and understand it.
I wish I could. I really wish I could.
That's a goal to work on, but,
I wish I had a babble fish in my ear.
Yeah, those would be cool. No, so the thing is like I land on the right simply because they have the most solutions or answers that I agree with. So let's say, like, I'm just making up numbers here, but let's say the left has 4 policies that I support and the right has 7. And then they both have 32 wrong. I'm voting with the right because it's the most good. I still hate them both.
Yeah. And
I believe that there's a lot of rhetoric on both sides, and I just have to put up with it and, do what I believe is correct in the moment. This is a newfound belief of mine, and so it's like really complicated and I really don't want to go into it, but I recently switched my views on abortion. I went from not supporting it to supporting it, but I support it for reasons that no person who supports it that I'm aware of supports it. Like, I have a whole different reason, and I'm not going to go into it at the moment because it's not a fully founded theory or belief yet. But if somebody asked me right now what my thoughts are on it would be, is I would say I'm for it, and then they'd call me an ally, and I'd say shut the fuck up.
Ooh,
I'm not your ally.
Yeah.
I disagree with your reasons for believing in it. It's not a human right.
Do you want to go into why that is, or should we can also
we're
say
on the race
that
topic, aren't we? Like, do you want to go on to that, or I'm fine with either. I don't know what the topics are for my next few weeks, so
Yeah, no, we are going to talk about that a little more. I'm sure we're going to go into it a little more in your next episodes. Just to let you know, our next episode is about political correctness. So I'm very excited to talk to you more about free speech and PC culture. And we're going to talk more about right wing, but I'm hoping that we can critique them both the same amount.
Yeah.
Because I think there are faults on both sides.
Absolutely.
So that's where we're going to start. We have other topics. I think we're also going to talk about reverse racism and immigration. And there's 2 other topics that have slipped my mind right now because I don't have my paper out because we kind of like went on the fly today.
Well, then do you want to do abortion instead of racism because we have that topic coming? I mean, you're the interviewer. You can take this conversation wherever you want to go.
Okay. I think we can definitely talk about abortion if you want to talk about like your more general idea for why that is also. Like, where did you...
Like, why my initial beliefs were...
At least, like, if you're talking about following a trail of logic, can you, like, lead us down the trail of logic that got you to your conclusion?
Yeah, okay. So, the general argument about abortion is whether or not... Well, so there's 2 arguments. There's whether or not it's taking a life, which is a very complicated argument for either side to have, because both sides says they're right, or correct, I guess I should say. And then the other argument is that whether it's the woman's decision or not. So addressing the first, the general left tends to believe that it's not life until either the first breath is taken or it's self-sustainable or anything like that. And the right tends to believe that it's upon conception. Now, I don't really know when life begins, but what I do know is because of evolution, we can safely say a unique DNA code is created upon conception, and it is plausible, but entirely it is possible, but very, very unlikely that code will ever be replicated in time ever. Like, it is an entirely unique set of numbers to dictate that specimen. And regardless of whether it is life or not, it has the potential for life, and that in theory should be enough for it to have value, if you believe that human life has value, at least. So people often argue, well, what about the safety of the woman? And to that I say, like, I don't, from what I've heard, and this is where I get a little bit rhetoricy because it's only information that I can gather based on sources, and obviously depending on where you gather the information, it's going to be biased one way or the other. Obviously, institutions that are for abortion have numbers that support their idea, and institutions that are against it have numbers that support the opposite. But the guys that I've noticed, or at least has been pointing out to me, I think I actually have got this original information from one of Ben Shapiro's talks. But I did look into it myself, so please don't think I just took that at face value. Was that there's never been an abortion to save a woman's life. There have been procedures that resulted in a baby's death to save a woman because the value of her alive, like, she's a guaranteed life, and so you want to keep that. But like, if she has cancer, you give her chemotherapy and it will probably kill the baby, but that's not an abortion. That's chemo. And that there's a difference between the purposeful execution and removal of a fetus and a procedure that it has a different intent resulting in the loss of a fetus. Now, to move on to the second argument, which is it's a woman's choice, I understand where the basis is that in that it's it's your body, it's a physical act that goes on, but I don't believe for a second that your convenience is a valid argument for killing something.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Um,
That's what this whole thing is. Is questions.
Just going on what you were saying, like about specific DNA patterns of like as soon as they are developed upon conception. Do you believe, or why do you believe that the idea, the I don't know if you would agree with me saying the moral idea, or like the individual perspective of that DNA code having absolute value, that is just not valued or understood by the individuals who get abortions?
I mean, that's a very blanket statement. I would say a vast majority of them don't have an understanding of that. Because statistically, the people who benefit from abortion being allowed the most are underprivileged women who can't afford to support a child. And so that's where that necessity comes from. And generally speaking, again, I'm being very, very stereotypical here, but I kind of have to. If you're in that situation, you're considered less educated, or you probably don't have time to think about the philosophical theory of what DNA creates and if it's unique, and, you know, what the value of a life is. You know, that's generally speaking, you're usually, if you're in a situation where you can't support a child, you're probably either really young or in a low socioeconomic status where you have to be worrying about other things. So in that sense, you're right. Though a lot of people who get abortions probably don't think about that. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people who are of high status who don't want a pregnancy to ruin their career, or the idea that they're sleeping with somebody that maybe the public doesn't know about to get out because they got pregnant. So they need to remove it as an option of covering their own tracks. And that's pretty dark in my own mind. I don't think a lot of humans spend time thinking about what fetuses' value is.
So, sorry, just to be clear, you're not talking specifically about the person who is wanting the abortion. You're talking about society as a whole?
70% society, 30% the person.
Okay.
Like, I'm being very general, which is why I can't say I'm talking about a specific person, but I was just talking about, like, how women who are generally considered lower class are the ones who abortion affects the most. Mm-hmm. You know? Because they're the ones who their livelihoods become at stake if they are forced to have children, and that's where you get the back alley abortions and stuff like that. Because really wealthy women are going to bribe doctors to get them anyways. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I can ask you another question, if that's okay.
No, I kind of got it back. I wanted to go back to the idea that human life intrinsically has value. So the argument is that, like, a woman has the right to decide what she can do because it's her body, but it's, I mean, obviously I want to make the argument that it's a fetus and it doesn't get to say, like, if the baby could make a call, it wouldn't want to die. But, like, death is an absolute, whereas birth without a, like, everyone talks about, like, you know, the foster system's fucked, and, like, what are you going to bring that kid into? Well, you're going to give that kid a chance. You know, there's a difference between a 1% chance at a happy life of success and an absolute nothingness. And, you know, if you believe in a soul or in, like a value of human life and morality, then you should understand that there are plenty of people who went through the foster system, didn't have parents around, didn't have a loving environment, and they are happy with where their situation have ended up. And that's important, because everybody has a chance, and if you take that away, you're the same as the oppressors you hate. Because if you say white men are taking away your right to have an abortion, you're taking away that baby's right to have a chance. And, you know, there's also the argument that, you know, there might be a man involved who wants to have a say in that.
I'm going to use the term mother in this situation because I think it applies the most. But, like, don't you think that the mother, the person who's carrying the fetus, like, goes through that logic, even if they're not using science as a basis or like sociology, if you want to call it, as a basis, that they understand that there's a value to a life that is inside of them, that they either know they can't take care of or don't want to subject to a certain kind of life, or have an understanding that they can't give them that chance. Or, I mean, like, I've never been in that situation, so, like, I can't begin to know. And so part of what I'm asking is, like, you haven't, at least my assumption is that you haven't been in that situation either. So how would you know?
That's a fair assumption because I am a 21-year-old man. But you're right. I'm sure there are women who go into that depth of wonder about, like, if that's the right decision making. To that, I just say, at least, again, I've changed my views on this. But, you know, what the right's common argument is like, so you agree it has human life and yet you're still going to get rid of it? That's murder. For your convenience, that's murder. It's the same application whenever someone makes the rape argument, which is, oh, she got raped, so instead of killing or castrating the guy, which, you know, because she's pregnant, it has to be a man. That's why I'm saying man. So because she got raped, we're not going to kill or castrate the guy, but we are going to kill the baby. That is some really fucked up logic, and I want to understand how we got from a point where we don't kill people for raping people, but we do kill the baby. You know, like, I don't understand that gap. If people had the intellectual consistency to say we kill both, I would be like, I still think you're wrong, but I appreciate the consistency. You know, two wrongs don't make a right, but one wrong is definitely just still wrong. I also want to talk, you said that you've never been in this situation, so you couldn't begin to understand. I really hate that, because a lot of people say that because I'm a man, particularly a white man, I can't begin to understand, and, like, I don't get to have an opinion on this. Yes, I do, because we make up 50% of the world's population, and, you know, you don't get to just say that morals are dictated by you. You know, society creates morals and values and laws together, and if 50% of the population is saying no, you have to address that. And there's also tons of women out there, some of which who have had abortions, who say it's not right. And if you're excluding men from the conversation, you still look at a 50-50 divide of women saying it is right, it's not right. So you need to realize that you're being a hypocrite by saying, you know, because you haven't experienced this, you don't get to have an opinion. Okay, fine. Then you don't get to talk about what it's like being a white man who owned slaves because you didn't do that.
I mean,
you don't get to say we're bad people because you weren't there.
You don't consider it to be empathy for a person who's going through a difficult situation?
You can be empathetic without having to agree. That's basically how I live my life. I can understand that your situation is tough, but I can also understand that, you know, if your situation is tough, that doesn't mean you commit crime. You know, most people who commit armed robbery are in a very bad place in their life. They're not doing it for fun.
So what about the argument that, yes, so murder is a crime, but abortion is not a crime. Abortion is legal.
At the moment, in Canada, and in most states, yes. So, not all things that are immoral are illegal, and not all things that are legal are correct or moral. And I still fundamentally believe that abortion is clearly wrong, but I also believe that at the current standpoint we're on in the world, we have to put up with it. That's why I've switched my belief. I think it's actually going to become a solution.
So it's necessary.
At the moment. I think we got here for the wrong reasons, though, because all of the arguments being made for abortion are wrong. Like, every argument I've heard for abortion, aside from the one I've come up with, is just atrociously wrong, in my opinion. Now, and also, I want to address, just so we're being consistent here, if anyone out there says that abortion's wrong because of religion, guess what? If we have freedom of religion, your religion is invalid in this conversation. You're allowed to believe that, but you're not allowed to impose that on other people. We do not make laws based on your religion. We make laws to support your religion, but that does not mean it has any validity in our conversation. So if you're saying abortion's wrong because God, you're allowed to believe that, but I'm going to tell you straight up, that is not a very solid argument. Because if I don't believe in God, you're making an argument from your own standpoint. Argument from authority being Bible. I don't believe in Bible. That's a flawed argument. Just had to be intellectually consistent there. That was a lot of rhetoric.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot.
You might want to re-listen because there's a lot.
I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but I find it very hard in these situations to be completely sensitive. And I think that's why conversations that are in depth about things as sensitive as abortion are avoided. It's a really tough conversation to have, and I want to be like, I want to be honest about that it was not easy to hear you say those things, but that doesn't mean that I believe they shouldn't be said.
I appreciate that, because that's kind of the whole point of this podcast, is that you and I disagree very drastically in our beliefs, but we also understand the importance of hearing what the others want to say. And I also think that you and I present a lot of arguments that are at least rhetoric light, if not rhetoric free. And, at least being able to articulate things that most people listening may have only heard from politicians or, professors or political speakers. It's nice to just hear what I would like to call two intelligent young people just trying to have a conversation. I don't think we're, super smart, but I think we're, articulate despite all our ums and ahs.
Yeah. We're getting better at that, though, already. So I think maybe that's a good place to end it for tonight.
Oh, wow, you're going to end it right on abortion, huh?
Yeah. Because I don't really know what else could be said to that, to that effect. And I kind of think that since it's such a sensitive topic, it should kind of just stay where it is.
Let it sink.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, I really do say a lot now that you bring that up.
It's okay. These are the early episodes, so I promise we're going to get better at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, without further ado, to all your human ears.
Oh, no closing remarks?
Oh, is that, I mean, we were just gonna, I was gonna say that was it. And then that's it,
I don't
it
get
doesn't
a closing
need an
statement?
Do you want a closing statement? Would you like a closing statement?
I thought, yeah. I thought it was just going to be whatever. I mean,
Let's do it.
Okay.
Do it. Say what you want to say, dude.
I just really wanted to say, I know we've bounced around a lot of crazy topics tonight, but I can assure you it's going to get a lot more in depth, and we're going to get focused with the 5 episodes coming up for each of us. That's where we get super specific. So these first episodes is just trying to let you get a vibe, well, for this one, about me, and see my points of view and where I sit in the view of the world. But the next 5 episodes are going to be where you're going to understand our logic and our train of thought, and how do we get to these conclusions, and you get to check our intellectual consistency and if there's any hypocrisy and all that. That being said, like, we're not looking, or like, I'm not trying to tell you that I have the answers, that I know it's right, or, that because you've believed something, you should feel bad because if anything I've said changes your perspective. Like, every human being is in a constant process of making new information applicable. And, if you ever get proven wrong, you shouldn't take it as a personal offense. You should take it as a compliment that you were able to understand why you were wrong. I want to emphasize that I don't like how politics and, empathy and morals are handled, and I believe in the individual isolationist method. Mm-hmm. That's the libertarian side of me, I guess. I don't know. I have a lot of controversial stuff, so I really hope you tune in to hear me get heated, because this was actually a pretty easy conversation.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think at least hopefully what this podcast is going to do is balance out those opinions so that we have like a very broad spectrum of beliefs, and we also have like an in-depth understanding of each person that we talk to, with the knowledge that everybody's opinion is different and they all come from a very like diversified background. So we're going to have very different kinds of people coming to talk, and at least if we're talking about like the spectrum of belief, then the right-wing spectrum or the hyper-conservative spectrum is one that needs to be demystified just as much as any other. And not, I hope I can do that. Because I think what tends to happen is, we need to prove that even though this person is right-wing, they're not a bad person. Yeah. And that's a disservice to everybody's knowledge, because that becomes a stereotype. So that was the point of today. And
one thing I forgot to add is that the left has been labeled progressive side of things. The reality is I don't believe there is such a thing as progressive side. There's just, there is just progression, and you're going to have to accept the fact that there is progressive policies on both sides.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're good to end now?
I think so, yeah. Sorry about that.
Wonderful. No, that's okay. It all worked out in the end. So without further ado, to all your human ears from all your human places, this has been Some of Us.
And this has been Some of Me.
So thank you for listening. I hope you continue. Good night.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.